Hi there, and this is a video tutorial that I've put together as a recap to the lesson that we went through on how we can create our marquetry or parquetry based designs that we're aiming to put onto our serving trays in Adobe Illustrator from an image that we found on the internet. So you should be able to see on my screen a bit of a finished version of what we're aiming towards. And at the end of this process, each of these individual shapes here, you'll see this one that I've selected, has an outline. That outline gets cut by the laser cutter and is cut onto the different colors of timber veneer that we have, or the different species of wood to get the different colors. And by using those different colors, the different tones, the different shades of browns and grays and pale yellows, we're then able to use the natural resource of wood to create this image, and that's the marquetry process. Now, I'll run you through this whole process from the beginning. Here is the image that I started with. It's an image that I have grabbed from the internet, and I've just made a copy of it and put it into Adobe Illustrator. Now, there's a whole separate process to get Adobe Illustrator on your computer, but it requires you having a license, downloading, and installing. Once you've got it, you simply open up your image file. So I did File, I did Open, and then I selected the image that I downloaded from the internet and ended up with this screen. From here, we want to use a specific tool in Illustrator, which is called Image Trace. This tool is kind of a little bit of artificial intelligence in a sense, where it will detect where it believes lines would be, outlines would be, and it traces those outlines. And there is a range of different configuration settings where you can change how detailed that tracing is, and I'll run you through that process. So we start with the select arrow, which is the top arrow selection tool. We click on our image, and from our image, once that's selected, we're then going to conduct the image trace. Now, to get to image trace, we go to Window, scroll down, okay, and we'll see image trace here is an option that exists. And that pops up for me over in my properties window, but for you it may come as a little pop-out window. It doesn't matter too much. I'm going to leave it just floating over here so it's a little bit easier for us to see. And when I'm ready to trace, I select my image, which I've done, and I simply press the trace button. Now at the moment, what you're seeing on the screen probably isn't too helpful and doesn't show us too much. And so this is where we start changing our options. In the mode, this is where I'm going to change it from this was a black and white picture to this was a color picture. And by changing the mode to color, it is going to use a specific number of colors. In this case, you can see here that it's set to 30. How many colors is it going to use to represent this bird? 30. So it then breaks this image up into 30 different colors. Now, if I wanted to create the image exactly like this, but out of my timber tones, I would need 30 different types of timber, different species of timber, or different shades in order to represent it. That's a lot for a project that's at a Year 9 level, so we probably want to simplify that a little bit. And to do that, I simply bring my color slider down to as low as it can go, which is 2. And this is where we basically go back to black and white. I work my way up one color at a time from here to determine what's the minimum number of colors or minimum number of timber types that I can use to represent my bird. At 2, it doesn't look like a bird. So then I'm simply going to just type in 3 here to increase the number of colors to 3. I can now see that there's a bird there, but I've lost some of the detail that I had previously. So if I increase that now to 4, okay, I'm typing in 4 and pressing enter. Again, I can now see that there's a bird there, but I might be starting to lose some detail. If I go 5, work my way up. 5 has added detail in, but I'm not sure that I got much benefit out of it. So I'm actually going to go back to 4. And then I look at this 4 and I look at some of the detail that I've got, particularly this section in around the back of the neck, some of the extra detail that's sitting in the beak, down the bottom of the throat of the bird. And I think it's probably too much. Maybe I'm going to go back to 3, because at 3, I was able to say, yes, I can see that there's a bird there, but the amount of detail that I need to put in is a little bit easier. Okay, so from here, once you have decided how many colors you need, I would recommend for a Year 9 task, it really needs to be 5 or less. And really 5 is still going to be quite challenging. Ideally, you'd be able to get this done in 2 or 3 colors. From here, we then say, what do we want to see? We are currently looking at the tracing results, but if I change this to outlines, the image is going to change just to the lines that the laser cutter is going to be using to cut out of the timber. And it's important to look at this point at how much detail there is, because this is where it can start to get a little bit challenging for us. If I think I'm going to start focusing in here, but if you have a look at this circle just here on the neck of the bird, that circle there is going to be incredibly tiny. It's going to be almost a crumb in size, and I'm going to have to stick that down to my serving tray. That is going to be incredibly difficult. So what I would try to do is, if I have an image, to try to get rid of any of those small components. Now, to do that, there is some advanced options, and this is where you have to start doing a little bit of trial and error, where you play with how many paths do we have? Okay, what are the paths like? Okay, you can see when I put it to low, it becomes a little bit simpler. What are the corners like? Do I have less corners, more corners, or do I try not to worry too much? So maybe less corners here. And then what's my noise levels like? And this is where you start playing again. And you don't just have to go to the 2 tops. Okay, you can go anywhere in the middle. You can click on the simplify button to try and simplify your image. You might want less. Okay. The more you begin to change these to less, low, less, etc., the more you start to lose the detail of your image. So it really is up to you to find a happy medium that is going to still show you what your image looks like without actually losing too much of the origin there. Okay, so if you think this is no good, I don't like what I've done, I want to go back to how it was, simply close your advanced window, go back to the top, and just go back to default. Okay, once we're in default, change to color again, and work your way through this process once more, where you can then start saying, okay, how many colors do I want? I want 3. And that puts it back to where you started before you began playing with the advanced features. Okay? So that's the tutorial on how you do the image trace. From here, we go then to the properties window. Okay? Properties. Okay, so again, mine's sitting over on the side. If you've lost yours, you can go window, properties. Okay, and that will appear for you. And in this properties window, there's lots of different options. Because this one is quite long, the properties window, might want to open it up a little bit. I click expand now. Once I click expand, the image trace separates the lines that we've created from the image that we started with. It actually splits them into its own process. We then will select ungroup, which is going to stop the lines from connecting together. I'm going to change my fill to, actually I might leave my fill, and I'm going to change my stroke into any color I want, just so I can see where the lines are. And I'm going to just increase the thickness just a little bit so that I can see them better on my screen. Now that I've done this, each of my individual colors, so you can see there I've got this piece here that I'm able to drag around. That piece there is its own piece separate from the image, which is good in a sense, because that's one piece that will get cut out on the laser cutter. This gray piece, again, will get cut out on the laser cutter. This blue piece will get cut out on the laser cutter. Gray together, black together, etc. So on the different species of timber. If you want to see what it will look like though, which is what I typically do, then I'm going to suggest that we click on our first piece. We go to the fill menu, and we actually then go to the library. In the library, I'm going to go to gradients, and then in gradients, I'm going to go down the bottom to wood, And I now get this library of wooden species, okay, where I can click on each of the different colors and I can begin changing them based on what I've been seeing. So something like that might be suitable for you, and you work your way through and add in those bits of detail. Now for me, I can see here that this little circle is going to be very difficult for me to actually cut and stick with a laser cutter because it's so tiny. So I'm going to select it and delete it. And you'll see here that when I select it and delete it, all it's done is actually delete the outline, the center of it, but the outline is still there. So in order to do that, again, I'm going to click that shape and press release. And again, it separates those shapes from the master shape. Okay, so it's a little bit of playing around in terms of the different options and settings that exist. So release. And the good thing is if you ever make a mistake, just Command Z and you work your way backwards. Okay. So I'm starting to delete out and release, starting to delete out any of these components that are actually providing a level of detail that's greater than what I want to be dealing with in the workshop. Because I want to make this as simple as possible for myself, but without losing the detail of the bird that I'm trying to replicate. Again, if you think you've made a mistake along the way, it's just a Command Z to work your way backwards. Release. And now, once I zoom out, I've only done a small component, but once I zoom out, you'll see that by deleting some of those really intricate details, the amount of detail that I've got for the bird, it is lost a little bit, but I can still very clearly see that the subject of this image is a bird. From here, what do I need to do? Once I've finalized and I'm happy with my entire project and I know what I'm going to be doing, we simply switch our color back to nil, okay? And we begin with these lines here, File, Export, Export As. Once we've exported, we are going to change the format to Autodesk Real Drawing DXF as the file type. I'm going to name this as Bird Outlines. Whatever you're doing, you would obviously name it as the outlines for your project, and export. When you do this export, little window usually pops up like this and asks you some details. I would always make sure I've got the option of preserve the appearance. I would outline text. I keep that ticked not for this particular project that has text, but if you're doing any future image traces or if you're working with any other outlines in the future, having outline text ticked is helpful. And then I click OK. Now that I've got that saved as outlines, I'll show you what the options are. It now has gone from being a photo, which was an image file that we got from our internet browser, and I'm now able to import it into SketchUp as a set of lines. So if I've got my serving tray here, I can do File, Import, this is in SketchUp, and then I navigate to where I've got my outlines saved, so bird outlines and import. Now, it takes a little while to find it because I've got so many things on my screen, but there's my bird outlines. Now what I can do, I'm going to move that over here so it's a little bit easier for us to see. And I can rotate that around. And I can move it so it's actually saved onto my chopping board. Oh, sorry, onto my serving tray. But you can now see what that might begin to look like on your finished project. So the point of bringing it into SketchUp, just to rehash that, is if you've got your image and you've done your outline process correctly, when you import it into SketchUp, it will appear exactly as outlines, which means you're able to more accurately represent what your project is going to look like. Okay, so that's the benefit for us there. If you import it into SketchUp and no outlines appear whatsoever, then I would encourage you to go back in this video, rewind, and just make sure you followed all the steps in terms of making sure that you have a stroke color, making sure that you have a stroke that is at least 1 or greater. Your stroke color can be black, that's fine, but it cannot be this white with a strike through it, because then your image actually disappears. Okay, so just making sure that you actually do have a stroke, which is an outline, and then file, save as, that DXF file type. If you've done all of those things, it should import into your SketchUp more accurately. And this file here, this Adobe Illustrator file, is a screenshot that you can put into your testing and prototyping section of your portfolio. Once you have worked through this, again, with all files, I'd encourage you to save it. And you would need to save this as an Adobe Illustrator. So I know we've done the export as DXF, but I do encourage you to save it as a file in your Year 9 Timber files in the serving tray folder, so that if you need to make edits later on, you can come back to it. All right, so that video has covered how to do an image trace, how to configure the basic settings and advanced settings around image trace, how to visualize what it will look like using the wood gradient fill colors, how to export it into Google SketchUp, and then how to import it into SketchUp so that you can prove that your outlines are working correctly. That DXF file that we use to get it into SketchUp, that is the exact file that the laser cutter will then be using in order to cut your project, as the laser cutter can read DXF files. Hope that's been helpful for you, and I look forward to seeing your Marquetry and Parquetry designs.